All right, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Placerville Planning Commission for Tuesday, September 5, 2023. We'll start the meeting with a call to order and pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And just confirming you can hear me. Yeah. Okay, great. I think I can hear myself now too. We'll go ahead. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Carter,
Present.
Chair Friend,
Here.
Vice Chair Keeney,
Here.
Commissioner Lepper,
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Great. We have a quorum. Item 3, closed session. We have none. Item 4, adoption of the agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Motion to adopt? Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And just a reminder, all commissioners, to please use your microphone whenever you're voting or speaking. Item number 5, consent calendar. The item on the consent calendar today is 5.1, approval of the minutes of the regular Planning Commission meeting of August 15, 2023. Chair will entertain a motion to approve.
I have a couple of changes to recommend.
So you will pull the mission. You want to pull the minutes?
Yeah, we'll pull the minutes.
Okay. We'll pull the minutes. And then item 6 then. Items pulled from consent calendar, 5.1 minutes. Commissioner Carter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Under 13.1, staff reports, I think we had some things that got carried forward from the previous minutes.
Yes.
We need to remove the second sentence there about the National Night Out. The next Planning Commission meeting being on August 15th needs to be removed. And then also under 13.2.1, the Commissioner Smith requesting an item be added. That was also from the previous meeting, so that should not be in the minutes either. So I would say all three of those sentences to be removed from the minutes.
With the first two, the chair agrees, but with the second one, did we not move item 9.1 to follow item 12?
Right.
How do we handle it? So I just kind of assumed it was handled under the special committee report.
We did, but that actual request was the item that came before us in the last meeting. So I think that's old wording that made it back into the minutes. I don't think it's applicable to last week's meeting or the
last month's, or the last meeting we had, last regular meeting.
That item was brought before us already. That's the one that was brought before us in the last meeting.
Item 9.1, which is moved to item 12, happened at our last regular meeting, correct?
Right. So
That is correct.
right. So the request to add it to the agenda was on the previous meeting, and it was added.
Oh, I'm sorry.
was added to
Now I follow you.
the last-
So that
yeah.
language under there
Yes.
is incorrect.
Yes.
So then, shouldn't also 9.1 move to follow item 12? But what did it actually show up as? Commissioner Smith actually made the presentation as part of 13.2.1?
No, so we kept it under 9.1. We confirmed with the city clerk how to address it in the minutes because we weren't sure. It doesn't happen too often. So what you'll notice is at the end of 9.1, there's some parentheses. Item 9.1 moved to follow item 12.
Okay, so we, in the course of minutes, we would not actually reflect that after item 12.
Correct.
Okay, all right, now I understand. Great. Okay, thank you for those corrections and notations, Commissioner Carter. Any other commissioners have corrections to the minutes? Any members of the audience have corrections to the minutes they wish to bring forward? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
I'll move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposition? Thank you. So, 6. Okay, I think I should get to the agenda and not the minutes. That would really confuse us all. And since some of you are sleepy, Item number 7, items of interest to the public, public comment, non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the commission on any items within the commission's purview that is not on our agenda this evening. To save time, I will simply ask, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the commission this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 8, written communication, non-agenda items. Have we received any communications under this item?
We have no written communication, Chair.
No written communication for item 8. Item 9, presentations and educational workshop sessions. I will speak more slowly. We have none. I shall enunciate and use proper grammar. Item 10, environmental assessments and public hearings. This evening we have item 10.1, a conditional use permit 2301 and site plan review, SPR 23-10 tire shop, consideration of a conditional use permit, request for operation of an automotive service tire shop within the commercial C-zone of the site plan review, SPR to change 1, occupancy of the existing building from retail sales to automotive service, 2, complete tenant improvements, including exterior painting, and I think that should be 3 and not 5. Replacement of signed copy for new business, and 4, find that the requests are categorically exempt from CEQA. And then Ms. Hunter, you have the staff report.
I have one item first to mention, which is I'll be recusing myself. My family has property that's a couple blocks away. It's close enough that the better practice is
Fair enough.
step aside.
Thank you,
Call
Commissioner.
me.
All right, Commissioner Hunter, you have the staff report then?
Yes. So CUP 23-01 is a request by the applicant to operate an automotive service business within the commercial zone, and site plan review 23-10 is a request for a change in occupancy, tenant improvements, and replacement of signed copy as described in the staff report dated September 5th, 2023. Pursuant to zoning ordinance section 10-5-15, a CUP is required for the operation of an automotive service business within the commercial zone. Additionally, the proposed change in occupancy and exterior modifications require Planning Commission approval pursuant to zoning ordinance section 10-4-9. It should be noted that Development Services staff issued a stop work order and generated a code case for the subject structure in July 2022. Staff has worked with the applicant since to bring a complete application to Planning Commission for approval. The project site has 3 structures addressed 131, 135, and 137 Placerville Drive. Construction of 131 and 137 Placerville Drive occurred in 1963. In 1976, SPR 76-21 approved the construction of 135 Placerville Drive, approving the proposed site plan with no further conditions. In 1983, Site Plan Review 83-10 approved the construction of a 1,500 square foot addition to the rear of 137 Placerville Drive. SPR 83-10 included a total of 6 conditions outlined on page 3 of the staff report. These conditions included a requirement for 19 parking spaces, landscaping, and a restriction that the addition be used solely for storage. Staff is requesting that these prior approvals be rendered null and void, and the remaining applicable conditions be pulled forward and included in attachment 2 of this staff, and have been included in attachment 2 of the staff report. Staff makes this request in order to compile all conditions and make future applications and record keeping for this parcel consistent with our current filing. As previously mentioned, SPR 83-10 required a total of 19 parking spaces. The proposed project would meet this requirement through parking lot spaces and service bays. Staff has recommended condition number 6 in attachment 2, requiring that the parking stalls be striped and clearly identifiable. Further, signage for the parcel is described in detail in the staff report on page 6. It is the opinion of staff that the signage included with the site plan review request is replacement of copy. Any future changes to the parcel signage will trigger a master sign plan. The color scheme for 131, 135, and 137 Placerville Drive has historically been a light gray exterior with accents of red, including the awning, door trim, and roof fascia. The proposed project would include painting of the siding of a darker gray and then painting the roll-up doors a bright red. Based on staff analysis, staff recommends the use of a less bright red color for the doors. Overall, it is the opinion of staff that the project is consistent with the purpose, intent, and criteria of zoning ordinance sections 10-3-4, conditional use permits, 10-4-9, site plan review, and 10-5-15, commercial zone. The project is further consistent with the land use and community design sections of the general plan, consistent with the Placerville Drive Development and Implementation Plan, and consistent with the City of Placerville Development Guide. Further, based on staff review, the project is categorically exempt from environmental review pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA guidelines, Section 15301 and 15303, in that the project includes the change in use from retail to automotive service within an existing structure and includes minor modifications to the exterior of the structure. As such, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the staff report as part of the public record, adopt the CEQA findings for the CUP and SPR request, adopt the findings in support of CUP 23-01, adopt the findings in support of SPR 23-10, render prior planning approvals, SPR 76-21 and SPR 82-10, null and void, and conditionally approve the project based on the findings included in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval included in attachments 1 and 2 of the staff report. Staff would add one minor modification to the proposed condition number 17II of attachment 2, to remove the language at the end in parentheses. This was accidentally carried over from the staff report and is confusing, so we would just remove it. This concludes staff's report on CUP 23-01 and SPR 23-10.
Thank you for the succinct report. Questions of staff by commissioners? Commissioner Lepper?
I have one. Have you guys spoken with the applicant about potential alternatives for the flirty red, or what is it, flirt something?
We had previously
alert.
discussed the color scheme with the applicant prior to this last iteration. The first was a very bright blue and the bright red. They came back with this, and we wanted to leave it up to the commission to determine. But no, we don't have any additional alternatives.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a question. With regards to the pole sign, and we have a removal date of November 23rd, I'm always interested in our enforcement. Can we tie removal, meeting that deadline, to final sign-off on the building permit, construction permit? I would think that's part of the whole package, right?
Yeah, staff would agree that with signage, when under a site plan review, that does cover signage, and if there is signage then that is non-compliant, the commission can make it a conditional approval that the pole be removed.
Okay, so just from my fellow commissioners, I would want that as a condition of approval so that they don't get final sign-off on their building permit until the pole sign is removed. You know, it has a deadline of November 2023, I think, approximately. If that makes sense. Commissioner,
Could you just clarify, so then you're satisfied with that being condition 18, or do
so
you
let's
want
see.
to
So condition
bolster it
18
somehow?
is the pole sign has to be removed. That's a condition.
Right, and
But
your concern is?
What I'm concerned is we have conditions, right? But if there's no enforcement or teeth to it, so the deadline goes and they get signed off on their building permit, they're all done, and then they're open, and then we come back, we have almost no teeth by which to compel an applicant to comply with the full conditions.
And
So by tying, making sure that they meet that deadline as specified in the terms and conditions to the final sign-off on the construction permit, then they're properly incentivized to make sure they meet the requirements.
And so that would be an additional, or?
Yeah, that's just, it'd be a modification.
Okay,
It'd be
we'll
a
get to that.
It'd be
I
just a
wanted to-
modification.
I'm
just-
sorry, I was having trouble
Hope that
hearing
make-
Pierre.
that
I
make-
just wanted to make sure that you were satisfied with.
Yeah. Oh, no, the condition's fine. I just want to make sure that we have appropriate enforcement teeth.
Okay.
And that's not directed to this particular applicant, it's just a general principle. same thing with landscaping, right? It always frustrates me when we're supposed to have landscaping agreements and then nothing ever happens, and then, applicants go on their merry way. Okay.
Yeah, Chair Friend, if staff could just
Yeah.
maybe suggest some language for condition of approval number 18. We would just recommend that the end of that sentence, by no later than November 1st, 2023, be removed, and we just replace it with prior to the final of the building
Well,
permit.
prior to the issuance of the final,
Prior to the final of the building permit.
Oh, yeah.
So we wouldn't final the permit until the pole's removed.
Yeah, great. That's perfect. Okay. And when we get to a motion, we'll make sure we come back to that language as part of the formal motion. Yeah, that's great. You understand my intent. Okay.
Just realized I did have one quick question. On this attachment 2, condition of approval number 2 and number 4, they seem to be the same. Number 4 mentions both the conditional use permit and the site plan review, whereas number 2 just references the site plan review. Should we remove 2 since it's already referenced in 4?
No, actually, we should remove 4.
Remove
It
4,
was
okay.
an error. We had the conditions of approval on one attachment at one point, and we separated them out, and unfortunately,
Understood.
did some editing
Because I
errors.
saw it on the other, okay, excellent. So we'll remove condition number 4 then, when the time comes for that also.
Sounds good. Okay. All right. If no other questions, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Invite the applicant or their agent to come to the podium and answer any questions that the commissioners might have, and certainly offer anything else you would like us, to know about your project.
My name is Zaman Hamim. I'm representative of Boulevard Construction as applicant. Actually, I'm project manager for this project.
So I'm going to hold you right there. Can we hear him? Is this microphone active? Okay, I don't know if our audio specialist can increase the volume. And if you could just be kind enough to speak clearly into the microphone.
Okay. My name is Zaman Hamim. It's okay right now? Better. Okay. I'm representative of the Boulevard Construction. I'm project manager for this project, and any question, I'm ready to answer.
Okay, so you're not the applicant. You're responsible for all the construction and modifications?
Actually, we are applicant. Boulevard Construction is applicant for this
Okay.
application.
All right. Questions of the applicant by commissioners? Commissioner Keeney?
Thank you. Thank you for coming here tonight to address any questions that we have. We really appreciate a representative showing up. My only concern is the color choice, particularly the bright red color for the door. And I wanted to see how you felt about possibly modifying that. I think you probably have heard from city staff that we tend to promote more earth tone colors and certainly more subdued colors. And I appreciate that you may have colors that are associated with your business, or that this just may be a personal preference, among your group. But have you thought about other choices? My concern is, I like red. I don't want to sound like I don't like the color, but I did drive by the project site, and I'm pretty familiar with that. I've been a customer of those businesses, and as I recollect, it's always been kind of a gray and burgundy theme, and that's certainly more what we've got today. And my concern is that your color choice fits in better in the context of the other two businesses there, the paint store on one side and then the auto glass replacement. So have you thought about other colors? Would you be willing to maybe propose something a little more subdued? Do you understand my concern? And
Actually, previously that was the red and blue we changed the red and blue in the last package, and it matched with the existing. If you, we have no problem with any change of the color. Already we talked with our client. He has no problem with the color.
Okay.
Any color city is accepting, he's accepting that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't, this isn't like flagship. You know, some businesses have a certain color scheme that they feel is important for their identity. This was just choices that you liked and thought. And I also appreciate that the layout, especially of the two buildings on, that are not the paint store, they're very, you know, it's all the same siding, so you probably want, and I think it's good too, to have your business be distinct, you know, that this is where your business is and that's where the Safelite, I think, auto glass store is now. So I appreciate that you want a distinctive break in the colors, but I'm happy to hear that you're willing to work with us and get something that kind of goes better in, like I said, in the context of the other businesses.
Sure, we will.
Thank you.
Perhaps you might, since you're automotive service tire shop, perhaps you'd consider a wrap for the doors like a checkered flag. Because that would also pop and be black and white, technically subdued colors. So kind of leave that up to you. I think that what we'll do, since you've indicated a willingness to consider some other colors, maybe we'll have you work with the staff. But you can also be creative, too, at the same time.
Okay, we will figure it out.
Yep. Other questions of the applicant by commissioners? Yeah. The only issue that staff really brought up was the color scheme. I take just in general, I take a little bit different position than my respected colleague Commissioner Keeney, and then you have three businesses, one right after the glass company, what's going to be your business, and then you have, I think it's the paint guy, right? Paint guy next to you. And I would think if it was my business, I would kind of want my business to, you know, stand out a little bit from the other two and not necessarily all kind of melt in. Is red necessarily the best color to get there? I don't know. Our guidelines suggest that we discourage certain colors. We don't prohibit them. We discourage them. So along those lines, again, my suggestion to you is, you know, possibly, you know, be creative. You can go with a single color as you've chosen. Just we're going to have you work with staff probably to get there for that. But I understand a desire to have my business stand out a little bit. And the face of those three businesses are all pretty much the same. It's all pretty much one-dimensional. And so use of different colors provides visual interest, depth, or just contrast. And I think those are actually a good thing and not necessarily a bad thing, as opposed to have everything all one monotone. So those are just my personal opinions. And so you'll have some flexibility. Other questions or comments by commissioners? All right, well, thank you, sir. And I do see you are the applicant for the application, and it was my error in not noticing that right up front. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak for or against this project? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and you have something else you want to add, sir?
Sorry?
Did you have anything else you want to add?
No, okay, thank you.
And you're all good. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right, well, seeing none, then I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to commission for discussion and possible action. And I'm satisfied that the applicant can work with staff to come up with an alternative color scheme. The applicant seems amenable to that, right? So, Commissioner Carter?
All right, I'll give it a shot here. And also the window wrap, I saw that was in the conditions of approval 16 also. You guys be working with him on that, right, to make sure that window covering is removed, or at least down to 25%?
Yes,
Okay.
we will work with the applicant.
Yeah, those were going to be my two questions, the color and the window,
The
so
window.
good.
Perfect. All right, well then, I will move that we,
Before you make a motion, Commissioner Keeney, you have your Microphone on. Oh, ready. You're ready to go. Very good.
You know,
Commissioner Carter, don't let.
I think we have our
Oh,
microphones on for recording purposes.
yeah, okay, fair enough. Okay, Commissioner Carter, go
All
ahead.
right, I move that we adopt the staff report as part of the public record, that we find the conditional use permit and site plan review requests are exempt from environmental review under CEQA Guidelines Section 15301 and 15303. That we make the following findings in support of conditional use permit 2301 for operation of a tire shop within the commercial zone. The project site contains 3 buildings on a total of 0.53 acres, including 2 existing automotive service supply businesses located within the commercial zone. Number 2, the project request is consistent with land use policies and goals. That the project request is consistent with zoning ordinance 1033. The project is consistent with the Placerville Drive Development and Implementation Plan. Pardon me. That we make the following findings in support of SPR 23-10, that the project request is consistent with general plan and land use element, goal C. The project request is consistent with the purpose, intent, and criteria of zoning ordinance 1044, 1049, 10515, and C, commercial zone, okay? Project request is consistent with the development guide for architectural design, specific site improvements, and signage as described in the staff report dated September 5th, 2023. That the approval is based upon the analysis provided in staff's September 5th, 2023 report. That we render SPR 7621 and SPR 8310 null and void. That we conditionally approve CUP 2301 and SPR 2310 located at 135 Placerville Drive based on project information and findings included in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval included in attachments 1 and 2 of the staff report dated September 5th, 2023 with the following changes on attachment 2, the removal of condition number 4, the removal of, on 17II of C condition number 17 in the parentheses, removing that language, and also editing item 18 to read the abandoned pole sign located along Placerville Drive, previously used for 135 Placerville, shall be removed prior to finalizing the building permit. And that,
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second?
A motion and a second. Chair would offer a friendly amendment.
I'd like to have some more discussion about the
Well,
motion.
we'll get to, oh, I guess we could have discussion on the motion, but I was going to
Because
offer
I'd
an
have some
amendment.
other amendments too, so.
Okay, well,
Go ahead, start the
first
discussion.
the friendly amendment I'd like to offer is that the applicant shall work, amendment number 20, amendment.
Oh,
Condition number 20. Applicant shall work with staff to resolve the color palette of the exterior of the building.
I'd rather move that up to condition 1. I had the same concern. Subpoint 2 says paint the exterior blue and all of floors red. How about if we just
I'm
strike
sorry.
that?
Let me,
So this is
okay.
attachment 2.
All right.
Condition 1, point 2. So
Okay.
strike paint the exterior blue. I was going to propose that we, agree to the city rain color for the siding as proposed, but I think we have general agreement that the red does not harmonize. So if your language, I think it was just to work with city staff on the color palette, why don't we just insert that language there under condition 1?
item number 2. Okay.
Shouldn't, okay, on that point, then, rather than get in, do we not simply want the exterior painting scheme, the applicant to work with staff on the overall interior painting scheme, rather than call out blue versus red versus whatever? We can leave it
Go
more
that way.
general.
And then they could end up with the siding that is proposed.
Yeah, let's just,
accessible
I prefer to
daylight,
just
yeah.
leave it more general. Item 2,
Just,
exterior paint, the applicant to work with staff regarding exterior paint color scheme.
work with staff, perfect.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. Okay, can we
Yes,
do, all right.
That takes care of my first concern. So,
I'll withdraw my amendment.
so we'll
I'll
just
withdraw
modify
20.
condition number
Yeah.
1.
Yeah, I'll just change that as part of condition 1. Okay, and then Commissioner Keeney, you had some other.
I did.
Uh,
You referenced it.
Let's do all of your, well, let's see.
Okay, did you have any other?
You know, so I'm gonna defer to you to make all the friendly amendments. I'm gonna withdraw my friendly amendment. All the
Okay.
friendly amendments are now in your hand.
My friendly. and
took my
using
language.
Your language and my
It's
friendly.
into your
amendment.
friendly amendment.
Okay.
I'm
Let's go that way.
Underscoring friendly.
Number 9, submit a landscaping plan for landscaping adjacent to Placerville Drive. And number 10, property owner shall enter into and record a landscape maintenance agreement. You made mention earlier about, enforcement and teeth for things like that. And I don't know if you're familiar with that or took a close look at the pictures provided, but the way I see this, the landscaping that would be done is limited to 2 very small islands that are between driveways, and they're on Placerville Drive. And I think, as you know, I think all of us probably have seen these attempts at landscaping, and we want a buffer. We definitely want something, but it often fails, and I think I looked on Google Earth, and in one shot, it was green and had been mowed, and in another shot, it was just kind of weedy and had not been irrigated. So my suggestion, rather than requiring landscaping as we typically think of it, plants, I would like there just to be rock that's maintained there so that you have a visual break. You do have some sort of break off of Placerville Drive and between driveways, and just rock it. Don't try to irrigate it. Don't try to put some plants in there that are bound to fail, that people walk across, and it gets neglected. I think it's a cleaner look. I would also like to stipulate that it be kept weed-free and free of trash, that kind of thing. But I'm growing frustrated with our attempts to have landscaping that is just from the outset not going to work. And so I'm sorry I didn't print out the picture from Google Earth, but you can see maybe from the site plan how small these particular islands are.
Yeah, right here.
Oh, there we go.
Right,
What
yeah,
page is
there's
that?
that one.
Page 8.
So,
Exactly.
I'm gonna ask staff, Pierre, is there a term of art or a technical term for like dry landscaping?
Xeriscape.
Xeriscape?
But
Well,
the
that's
staff would like
plants.
to point out that our guidelines do not allow an all-rock landscaping. It's not permitted in commercial zones. So the staff would recommend xeriscape. You can have a lot of rock in there, but there needs to be some plants included in that
Could they,
per our guidelines,
so they couldn't use
just rock.
They couldn't just
they
rock
couldn't use
even the
metal
small?
structures painted to look like plants?
No, I'm
Or
sorry.
palm trees?
No.
Inside joke.
I know, I understand.
Okay.
Oh,
Wow,
what
so-
about turf, like AstroTurf?
That's not permitted either in commercial zones.
Huh. That's something that we may want the council to revisit at some point.
I think so too. It's
Right.
just, it's frustrating. I'm not sure it's a good use of water.
Yeah.
If it's something that is big enough to, big enough that the plants could succeed and not likely to get walked across,
What about cactus?
you know.
Cactus or water?
I don't know, are they on the plant list?
Well, if staffs can point out, it is currently grass, and it's currently irrigated. It's just that we just want to make sure there's a landscaping and maintenance agreement to take care of that landscaping. That's the whole intent here, not to bring up a whole issue of
Okay.
landscaping, which
Well,
was
I'll
previously
withdraw that.
approved
Let's just go with.
in a previous
I don't
site
think
plan review.
in that spirit, I don't think it'll be a real burden on the applicant.
But I just,
maintain,
I think
since it's
we do
irrigated.
need to pursue this.
I
when
think
we
you're
have
right.
small pieces that are destined to
I'm
be
go-
abused, so.
I'm gonna, on this point, I'm sorry, we're kind of getting, it's my fault, but I'm the chair. I'm gonna ask staff to kind of keep a parking lot or bin list, if you will, of these kinds of things that we need to bring to council's attention. And then maybe at the end of the year, we can, as a Yuletide gift to council, say, here are some things that we've dealt with
Again,
in this year,
then we
and
would
we
update
think they
our
warrant,
guidelines appropriately.
review. So anyway, that's an aside. So no issue with an,
Since it's not
9 or
allowed,
10.
obviously, I don't want to make findings and make a,
right.
federal case about this, but it's just my opinion that this is going to be difficult to keep looking. This one picture from earlier this year, it looks fine. It is just grass that someone had bothered to mow, but I just think that we can do a little bit better as far as maintenance and use of water. So.
If staff could point out, so in SPR 83-10, landscaping was a requirement of that approval and the submittal of a landscaping plan. Based on a review of records, we'd never received that, and that's why this one carried forward. And so the landscape maintenance agreement would include maintenance of that, but also maintenance of the parking lot, wheel strips, making sure that it doesn't disintegrate, and also the striping.
For my edification, 'cause I'm constantly learning, how involved is a landscaping plan in this particular instant when we're dealing with, it looks like all of 20 square feet?
It's standard boilerplate language, but it just allows the city then to enforce, like say, for example, we had a new tenant come in and they just let it go to weed and they weren't taking care of it all.
Right.
It became unsightly. Then the city would have the ability to either compel the property owner to fix the landscaping in accordance with the approved landscaping plan, or the city could then send its own crew out or hire a professional landscaper to do it, and we would then lien the property.
But this is not, in this particular case, it's not going to be onerous, and it's something that you can help the applicant with, right?
With the landscaping?
The landscaping plan, I mean, all they've got is this little grassy area, right?
No, I think from staff's opinion, we're probably going maybe making something larger than it really is. It is very small landscaping.
Right.
But it was required of a previous site plan review.
Right, but but
carrying
our
that
language is
forward.
landscape plan. I want to make sure that for the area that we're talking about, the applicant, that there's not a lot of effort required to meet this requirement, right? For what
I think they're already maintaining it.
Okay, but they have to submit a plan.
We
is
just
my
need
point.
right, we need a plan that was never submitted, but I think what's there is fine.
Okay,
The size of the area we're talking about.
well, what's there is fine, but there's no plan to support what's there. Is my
That's
point.
right, and that's why we're requiring that a landscaping plan be submitted, because it wasn't with the previous
Right.
site plan
So
review.
I'm sorry if we're talking in circles. I want to give the applicant some assurances that even though he has to submit a landscaping plan, it's not a big deal, it's not onerous, and that staff can help them take care of that, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's an easy deal, because
Easy
a
deal.
landscape plan for this project is not the same as a landscape plan for, name some other substantial commercial development, right? The language is the same, but what's actually involved is very, very different, right?
That's right.
Okay, if you understand what my point is here?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I'm happy, I'm satisfied that staff says it's no big deal, we'll take
And
care
it
of
can
it.
stay a turf too, as long as it's maintained. and
Yeah,
that's what the
yeah.
LMA is about.
Right, but since nothing was submitted, the applicant is technically starting from scratch, and I just want them to know it's not an onerous requirement. Okay,
I had one more change back to, page 11, early in the motion that was made. It's number 6, page 11, last line, let's see. Subject to the recommended conditions of approval included in attachments 1 and 2. Just want to add the words "as amended." Attachments 1 and 2 of the staff report dated September 5th, 2023, since we did make, let's see, 1, 2, couple of changes, 3 changes, 2 changes, 3 changes. So those are all of my friendly amendments.
I am happy with your friendly amendments, and will include them in my motion.
Yes, I'll update my second to approve the amendments.
All right, we have a motion duly made and duly seconded and duly amended. Any additional discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Chair Friend,
Aye.
Vice Chair Keeney,
Aye.
Commissioner Lepper.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries on a 4-0 vote. We approve it. It is subject to a 10-day appeal by somebody who may want us to do something different. You need to work with staff on the painting scheme, overall painting scheme. You guys will figure something out. And then, I'm not discouraging you from being creative. And then also with the landscape stuff, you have a little bit of work to do there. Okay? All right, good. Thank you for your application. And then we can let Commissioner Smith know that he may return. Is that where Pierre just went? I think it's probably what he did. Okay, great. All right, then, moving on the agenda, as soon as I find my agenda. All right, moving on then to item 11, continued items. 11.1 site plant review, SPR 2305 historic district review, consideration of a site plan review application within the single-family residential / historic district zone to modify an existing single-family home to replace, replace wood windows with vinyl, 2, repaint the exterior facade, trim gutters and door, and 3, replace lighting fixtures visible from public right-of-way at 3176 Cedar Ravine. And Ms. Hunter, you have the staff report, please.
Thank you. So the first public hearing for this project was held on April 18th, 2023. It has been continued 3 times, the first on June 20th, then July 18th, and lastly to tonight. The first 2 continuances were in order to provide the applicant time to provide Planning Commission 3 bids for window alternatives, vinyl versus wood, to determine if a finding of economic infeasibility was possible. The last continuance was to push the remaining item, windows, to the first meeting following the joint City Council and Planning Commission workshop on historic preservation. So the exterior color scheme and lighting portion of the request was approved on July 18th. The remaining request for Site Plan Review 23-05 is to replace 12 existing wood windows with vinyl windows on the existing single-family residence located within the Cedar Ravine Historic District. Attachment 1 of the memorandum dated September 5th, 2023 is a compilation of the bids provided by the applicant. Attachment 2 is a copy of the original staff report for the project provided to Planning Commission on April 18th, 2023. In summary, staff originally recommended denial of the proposed windows based on the following. The structure is over 70 years of age. The structure had been minimally altered since its construction. The structure contains multiple characteristic features of ranch house style architecture, and the existing windows would appear to be original to the structure. Zoning Ordinance Section 10-4-10, Historic Buildings in the City, does not include a period of significance, and the purpose of the ordinance is to provide conditions and regulations for the protection, enhancement, and perpetuation of historic-type architecture. However, based on joint special meeting of the City Council and Planning Commission held on August 29th, 2023, a period of significance for the residential historic districts may be included in a future update to the zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission has the authority to make its own determination regarding the building's visual character and consistency of proposed work with city goals, policies, criteria, and regulations. Staff would recommend that the Planning Commission consider composite or fiberglass windows rather than vinyl. This concludes staff's report on SPR 23-05.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. Questions of staff by commissioners? I have a question. Since in your staff report, you do make reference to at least some of the discussions from our recent joint meeting, which I thought was, really informative. It was helpful. I appreciated the dialogue immensely. But these aren't the only items that came out of that, right? So this is kind of a general question. I was wondering if staff is compiling kind of a list of the major points that kind of came out of that meeting, in addition to these, because these were a couple of the things that came out, but there were a lot of other things that came out as well. And so I realize you've pulled out a couple that might be, in staff's view, specific to this application, but I think there could be some others that might equally be applicable. For example, and this is just myself speaking, I found flexibility to be something that the council expressed. I really got the sense that they say, we kind of need to be flexible, and certainly until we kind of figure out this whole question of buy-in, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just wondering, and maybe this is an aside, but since you did put them in a staff report, if you're at some point going to compile a summary of what we had at our last meeting.
So the minutes are being prepared by the city clerk, and once they're available, they'll come before you for approval, just like regular consent calendar.
Okay. All right. And so the only point relative that I would offer to my fellow commissioners, specific to our consideration of this item, is that each of you may have some other recollections of points that council, that came up in the discussions. And so I would not discourage you from also bringing those forth as part of your deliberations. I think what you brought forth is correct, but I think there might be some others as well. Okay, any other questions of staff? All right, if not, then Commissioner Smith?
Yes, we do have some discretion, but I think we need to promulgate some standards. At that joint meeting, there was a reference made to Grass Valley. I don't know if anyone besides Commissioner Carter and I have made copies of all 154 pages, but it is an exceptionally helpful guide and provides consistency. I guess I'd want to remind you that several months ago, Commissioner Carter and I proposed hearings, which some of you suggested reference to that joint meeting. But the resolution that was given to us 8 years ago said, and that's Resolution 7896, that our duties includes to act in advisory capacity to the City Council in all matters related to historic districts and resources, to maintain a local inventory of historic resources within the city as established by the City Council, make recommendations to the City Council to update the inventory, to advise the City Council and city boards and commissions on necessary historic preservation matters. I think that's what we should do so that we come up with consistent matters. Over the years, all these issues we're now talking about have always come up in the context of contested cases, which makes it very hard to talk about coming up with resolutions for this applicant or any other applicant similarly situated. We need to be able to do what we were told our duties included, give advice to the council, and that means hearing from the public interested parties. That's my suggestion. That needs to be done.
Okay, so not disagreeing with that. I'm going to ask you to hold that thought. I'm not going to ask you to repeat it, but it is going to be relevant, I think, when we get to the special committee report at the end of the meeting. What you just touched on, I think, is absolutely relevant. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. I believe the applicant is in the audience. This is our third time with you. Always happy to see you, sir. Okay, so, yeah, we will not request the bailiff bring forth your materials. So I'm just going to take the prerogative of the chair to say I think we can have a little bit more back and forth discussion this evening. It does not have to be a presentation. We know all about your project. We know the issues that you are facing. We have the materials that you submitted. I hope you kind of appreciate perhaps where we're at this point.
Very much so.
I am going to say, not to influence my fellow commissioners, but I tend to concur with the staff recommendation as to the resolution on this, which would be kind of a middle ground between not allowing vinyl and not requiring wood replacement. And I'm sure you have the information from staff in terms of what they're recommending. And why don't we take that as our starting point and see where it goes?
Sure. Staff's great. I'd rather just do the vinyl windows. I think we heard from them, between the planning commission and the city council last week, that this is a non-contributing home, that it doesn't fall into the time period of what we're trying to preserve. The aesthetics and the character is what's important, not necessarily the material used, as long as it still maintains the look of the area. And if you look at the little house right next to it, 3178, although unpermitted, it has vinyl windows on it that were picture windows where picture windows are, double hung where double hung were. And it's a very cute little house, and it's like the sister or brother or twin of the home, 3176 that we're talking about. So being that it's a non-contributor, I think it's important that, like, I throw this out that and I don't know if you, because you guys are much more involved than the average citizen, which I appreciate, because we need people like you to, like, maintain things. But you're going to find that 10% of the people that live in these districts are going to be like, I'm American, you can't tell me what to do, and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do. Excuse my language. And then you're going to find another 10% that are like, we need to keep it exactly the same as it was in 1850. But then you're going to find 80% of us that we want it to look great. We want it to look good. We want the appeal that's there, the charm that's there, that old world feel to stay and maintain. But we don't really care about what materials used as long as it looks the same. And I think that's going to be your overwhelming majority of homeowners in the area, is that as long as it maintains the character and the aesthetics that have been there all along, they're going to be happy. And I don't think the vinyl windows take from that. And I think I brought this up in my letter that I wrote way back in April, and at that first meeting, that the CEQA is just guidelines. You guys have the ultimate authority, because none of these homes are registered with the state and that kind of thing. So you guys, followed by city council, have the ultimate authority to do whatever you feel is right to do. So I appreciate it, but honestly, like, it's $2,000 just to get here, $500 in the site plans and all this kind of stuff. I'd really prefer to put vinyl windows in versus the extra $5-6 grand that I forget exact numbers, $5 or $6 grand that it costs to put in the fiberglass windows. I just don't see the need of that at this point.
Okay. I mean, that's straight, that's brief, concise, to the point, and I think it's easy to understand. So I think you're going to have to give us an opportunity to have our deliberation then and discuss, you know, how we feel about it, and what we think, and what we're going to come up with, which, of course, is our decision, can always be appealed to the city council.
Understood.
So leave that.
One of him's got vinyl windows with.
All right. All right. Thank you, sir. Any questions of the applicant, Commissioner Keeney?
Thank you for coming out one more time to
Sure.
answer our questions.
I actually, it's kind of, I do enjoy listening to all this stuff. I just don't have time for it.
And I appreciate that you understand that this has been a little challenging for us, trying to find a path forward.
Yeah.
I would like you to help refresh my memory about the look of, I think we talked about this last time, the fiberglass window. You submitted a bid, and I think that is called the Marvin Infinity.
Mm-hmm.
What? I hope you heard, and I hope everyone out there watching this very important meeting hears that it would make it really easier, a lot easier on Planning Commission if we had a sample of what was proposed. But did you take a look at that Marvin Infinity?
Yeah, so it's the
And
same
what
as
does
like
it
a
look like?
fiberglass front door, where basically it's got a wood look to it. It's got a grain.
It has a grain on the
It does have a
exterior.
grain on the exterior and the interior on most of them. It does have a stamped. I don't exactly know how they make it, but it's like stamped on there. And they'll, like, on the doors, they'll put like paneling with the grain and all that kind of stuff. On the windows, you will have bevels going to the glass, and then you'll have the wood grain in all of that as it's stamped on there.
Is that texture available on the vinyl? It's not.
It's not.
Okay, so on
The
the
vinyl's
fiberglass,
smooth.
it is available, and a bevel at the edge as well. Oh, okay.
Well,
I'm just trying to picture what that
yeah.
option might look like. I'm more
I mean,
familiar
it looks
with-
like a wood window.
Okay,
I thought I put
That's
pictures.
my
I
only
thought I
question
submitted
right now.
pictures with the. I thought I submitted pictures of.
and I couldn't
packet.
find them in my files, and so I appreciate you just kind
Okay.
of refreshing.
I was
I
gonna say,
tried
I'll go
to
look through it, but it would
I
take
was
me a while
flipping
to
through
find
all
it all.
my old files, and I just couldn't come up with a. Well, actually, a good resolution of, of, I think I still had the brochures that you gave us, but, what's that really going to look like
Right.
in person? But anyway, thank you for
You're welcome.
doing the legwork to go take a look at, all these samples
Sure.
and tell us what they look like.
Are the existing windows the original windows? Who's to know?
I don't know. They used metal casement windows in the 50s. They used all kinds of stuff. I don't have a great answer for that.
All right, so you have no history.
I didn't own it back then. I've only owned it for a year.
Okay. Other questions? All right, Commissioner Smith, yes, go ahead.
If you would, you were here when there was this joint session.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you were here before when there were a couple of folks who owned the Thompson House on Cedar Ravine as well. Do you remember those folks?
I remember most of the discussions. I might not remember them exactly. I'm sorry.
They described indos, which are inserts that go inside those historic glass windows that go back to 1850s. And they're much cheaper than vinyl. The cheapest vinyl you can get, they're much cheaper. They pass code requirements, and they don't require even a contractor. You can do it yourself. Did you know about that?
I have no idea. Sorry, I don't remember this.
Okay. The suggestion is that maybe if finances is an issue, that would suggest that all options for reducing the expenses may not have been considered. Another thing is to ask you about this standard where you suggested that the other homes were not historic because they're not on a registry. Did you know that under the California Environmental Quality Act, that's not required? That it does not have to be registered as an historic building to be considered historic? 71 years would do it. Do you know that?
I understand that. If it's, well, I'm not
I
going to
appreciate-
debate with this. Sure.
We identify all of us with the kind of concerns you're expressing.
Well, I'm looking at the timeline of what's considered, what our history for our city's considered, and that's like 1850 to like 1920, 1930. And I think this falls kind of out of that. When they put this historic committee together in '89, if I don't have all my numbers right now because I'm not looking at it, but I think it was in '89, the city council decided to put the historic districts into place. It wasn't actually historic at that time.
We've heard that, but we haven't heard it from the direct sources. We don't have that in the
Well, it's in
legislative
this,
record
it's
to go
it's
on.
a ordinance that the city council voted on in '89 to put it into place. So that means my home was only 29 years old at the time, which means it wasn't actually a historic home when the city council put the ordinance into place to vote on it.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. And I think even certainly Councilmember Clarici, if not others, they said, that gets to the whole issue of buy-in and how are these districts originally created, and I don't want to use the word arbitrary, because I'm sure that there was a lot of deliberate thought that went into them, but he's absolutely correct. At the time that they were created, he had a 20, 30-year-old home, which doesn't fall under any kind of consideration, time period or otherwise, right? And it's only because he's coming to us now. But I don't mean to cut your discussion with him short, Commissioner, but I do think we probably need to move on to our deliberation at this point. So, all right, thank you, sir. Don't run away because we may have questions.
We're right here.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak to this project? All right, seeing that, I'm going to bring it back to the commission for discussion, possible action, which may also include the applicant, because we also have some other considerations that we've kind of glossed over, the exterior painting and et cetera, et cetera. Or did we already cover that? We already approved that. All right. So the windows. So here's, I'm going to direct my question to staff, but certainly it's really open for consideration. So we certainly have the option of wood, right? The current windows are wood. We don't know if they're original or not, but they are what are in there now. Okay, we have no idea what was there before these windows. I'm curious to know if these wood windows lasted since years of construction, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. So, by strict adherence to the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines, it would be like for like, it would be wood replacement. On the opposite spectrum we have, and what the applicant prefers, we have vinyl. And vinyl is clearly not wood, so it's clearly not a like for like at all. Staff has recommended, and I think it has merit, and it's a middle of the road in terms of cost, the fiberglass. But let's make no mistake, the fiberglass is not wood. So in which case, how is the fiberglass different than vinyl? Even though it might have wood grain, I don't think any of that wood grain can be seen from the road, which is kind of our standard for how we deal with things. And so then I have to ask the question, how much different would vinyl windows look from what we see right now? I mean, let's assume everything was repainted, everything was all bright and shiny, right? And not in its current state. All nice and new and bright. He's going to repaint everything. Everything's nicely repainted. Would we really be able to tell that much difference between wood and vinyl, right? That's a question to consider. But then what is our, in our attempt to adhere to standards, which exist, the city has adopted them, even though his home was only 29 years old when it all of a sudden found itself subject to these standards. They still exist, right? How do we balance that? So this is, I think, really kind of the challenge for us, and there's not a real clear direction for me. I think one of the reasons that the applicant is back here is because it was the finding of financial hardship, right? That's really one of the findings we could make that would allow us to reasonably and defensively deviate from the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines. That, to me, is an argument for the fiberglass. Okay, that's the one argument in the win column for that. Beyond that, I think that I think requiring wood replacement, I think, would be excessive, not only because of the age of the home at the time that it was wrapped up into the historic district, and also because of the cost. So I could support, and I probably would be more supportive of staff's recommendation than anything else, but I would not oppose a finding that would support vinyl. So with that, I'm just going to kind of leave that to my fellow commissioners for additional discussion on the matter. Commissioner Keeney, I see that your microphone is on.
On all the time.
It's on all the time. So if you're mumbling under your breath, we have
It's
it on
caught
record.
on tape.
Okay. So you don't have anything imminent to share? Or go ahead.
I'll just join in if no one else has an immediate question.
I do.
Go ahead.
If you're going to ask. I guess what I'd follow up with what the chairman said is that it's true that in the 1980s, this building was 20 or 30 years old, but everyone who lived on that block, on that entire street, knew that the standards existed. That's important to know. Secondly, if we're going to consider financial considerations, we know that there are other options, like windows, which go on the inside of a window. So it doesn't mean, so if we're going to consider costs. It's going to be very difficult because it's so amorphous and it keeps cropping up over and over and over. I think we need some consistent standards we can use in the future, but the ones we've heard tonight in the context of this case doesn't help us because we don't have anything specific. As far as other people over the years may have ignored this, that's also true for people who go through stop signs all the time, and we don't get rid of stop signs and stop laws just because it's ignored some of the time or maybe even often. So because someone has in that neighborhood violated the ordinance in the past doesn't mean that it should be done here. Those are the considerations I guess I'd ask you to consider.
So I'm glad you brought up the endos again, because I have to be perfectly honest, and I don't know about how anybody else feels about this. I do not understand at all how the endos solve or relate to this issue. I really don't. I saw the picture, and I saw them bending and inserting something from the inside. I don't see at all how it relates to the window as a complete a unit or system.
Sure. The answer is that what you're looking for, whether it's vinyl, wood, double pane, triple pane, argon gas filled, or whatever, is you're looking for insulation. You're looking for windows that will withstand the elements so that you don't waste energy. That system does it. I might add that.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you short, but that to me, I'm dense on this matter. That doesn't seem to me to correct the question of what the whole unit is made of. It's almost like putting see-through insulation on your window, right? That's how I'm interpreting what you're saying.
That's an option, but we're not in the position, especially since we don't have any established guidelines, like you mentioned, maybe we could develop in the future, but as we sit here tonight, we haven't evaluated that, and it's really not within our purview to specify something like that the project proponent hasn't brought forward. The project proponent has, we asked, he made a claim of affordability. We asked him to go out and get additional bids to help substantiate that claim, which he did. So, our consideration needs to be restricted to what's before us as opposed to yet another alternative. Now, if someone came before us in another project with that, then, it would be, we would be able to consider it then. But I agree with you, Michael, that we need to look at the three options that our applicant has brought forward.
Well, the idea of what we're looking at is that we're looking at something because the applicant has raised the issue of cost. So the idea of endos is not that you should use it. I don't care whether you use it or not use it, but it does refute the notion that vinyl windows are the cheapest option. They're not. Also,
But we're not looking for cheapest, we're looking for affordable.
well,
So
what I
I
described,
think he's proven his case.
well, what I've described is affordable. I would note also in the Grass Valley program,
But we don't have we aren't, I appreciate that you've researched what they do in Grass Valley, and I'm sure it's, from what I've read of it, it's probably very thorough. However, we're bound by our own ordinance, and so we can't just here tonight adopt the approach and the recommendations from the Grass Valley.
well, what I've,
And endos still run us up against the same issue of not like for like.
well,
So we don't escape.
There's other issues
we
too
don't escape
besides insulation, which you argue a good point that they provide that, but there's also integrity for the building. Another thing a failing window does is allow for water intrusion. So that but not to get into that point with the applicant, but that may be another valid concern is that that you need to make it weather tight, not just better insulation.
And these existing windows are not functional. If memory serves, there's broken glass and non-functioning windows, which that would not address the non-functioning issue either. So I think the replacement is obviously what we need to be talking about. So yeah.
Commissioner Smith, what I do want to say in defense of the points that you're raising is that we do at some point, and this will get us to our future item, we do need to derive standards, not unlike the standards we have driven in our planting guide, right?
And
Here's
our
where
development
here's
guides.
what are acceptable trees, shrubs, etc. Okay, we have a guide for folks to use. We need to work towards development of a guide that addresses what you're talking about, as well as the other technology, including the vinyl over wood, right? I mean, the vinyl over wood is an interesting, if you think of it, it's very, very interesting because, okay, we are using wood, but we're putting vinyl over. So, what's more important, the vinyl or the wood? It's a very interesting conundrum. I think that, yes, I think we need to we need to accept one of the three options that are before us, that being vinyl, the fiberglass, or the wood. And that's what we can approve. I think that's really what our purview on this has to be tonight. Consideration of additional standards, of future standards, is certainly something that needs to happen. And I think Grass Valley may very well serve as a template for us to use. I don't doubt that at all. But I think specific to tonight, we need to concern ourselves with these three choices, unless the applicant desires to bring forth yet another, which I do not think that is what the applicant wishes to do. So, with that, perhaps the best place to go next would be a motion or additional discussion. Commissioner Lepper.
Yeah, I of course still kind of struggle with this without clear outcomes, although I think we made a lot of progress at the joint meeting that we had. But I think that the difference from what I understand is $11K for the vinyl, $16K for the fiberglass, and $22K for the wood. And I just think after the discussion with City Council and specifically asking them if they were comfortable with vinyl windows in homes that were older, the interpretation I got was that they were. And I'm just not sure at this point that forcing $5,000 to be spent in order to have the wood grain that isn't wood. And so we're leaning towards that, but we're also kind of making more money be spent on something that I don't think will have a significant visual impact because of the framing, all of that. So I'm actually kind of in favor of the vinyl windows, personally.
And I could see making a finding that at the time that this home was wrapped up in the historic district, it was only 29 years old. I think that finding is sufficient to warrant not a strict adherence to the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines. I mean, I'm comfortable with it.
I just
personally.
I'd be more comfortable just sticking to the affordability that we've carried through, and we now have clearer understanding with City Council of how there is some flexibility.
You mean vinyl versus wood? Are you saying vinyl
The
versus
vinyl,
wood?
if,
So you're comfortable with here's
I
the wood
am.
cost, here's the vinyl cost?
Right. As you drive around looking at the houses in our historic districts, the ones that have vinyl, I think, yeah, you can see that from the street. And I'm not sure I could tell the difference between fiberglass and vinyl, but definitely vinyl and old wood. However, if you think back to what we talked about during the workshop and what you've read in the standards, we're looking at capturing a look and a feel. Yes, there's the language about replacing in kind, using the same, but we've been over that road before. But there are other elements that are also important to the historic district, and that is capturing a look and feel. And what's being proposed here is a double hung, same style window, same color, white, as what we have on the house. And, I appreciate what you were saying about the house being, maybe built sometime in the 50s, we're not sure, but exactly how old it is and did it qualify to be considered historic at that time. But as we sit here today, it is in our historic district, and the intent of historic districts are to capture and maintain that aesthetic. And so it's up to us to think about color, texture, style. Those are also important in the district as a whole. And I think that gives us the ground, or I want to say the platform, to make the argument that the vinyl conveys that same aesthetic, and it doesn't degrade the quality of our historic district.
That's probably more important. It does not degrade. Yeah,
And- And this was an affordable house when it was built.
And if one thing one thing that certainly came out of the discussion was how nuanced the Secretary of Interior's guidelines are. It's an incredibly nuanced document. It is really, biblical scholars could tear at it for centuries, I think. So,
Yeah.
okay, those are well-reasoned points, Commissioner. Commissioner Carter?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. I'm really uncomfortable with the financial feasibility part of this whole, and perhaps my colleagues can help assuage some of these problems, but not knowing anything about the property owner's family, his financial situation, a finding of financial feasibility, we're wholly unable to make a determination of the applicant's finances. And so I'm uncomfortable relying on that reason to go with vinyl.
Let me jump in on that.
Thank you. Yeah,
Because
perhaps
I
you
don't,
can
see, I think, I understand the direction you're approaching it from, but if an individual, regardless of their amount of money that they have available to them, if we say, okay, if one option to fix a problem is $1, and another option to fix a problem is $100, well, why would I pay 100 times more to fix the same problem, right? So the feasibility is not relative to an individual or an applicant's economic situation. It's relative to the cost of correcting the problem, and so clearly the wood windows are, in this case, are
Double.
substantial, at least double. So,
But somebody in the applicant's same situation may think that that's important, and despite the financial is
right. So
will be willing to make that investment.
and that is perfectly their choice.
Right.
Right. They perfectly their choice. But remember, we're coming at it from a regulatory imposition.
Right.
And so I think that's the standard we have to ask. And so somebody comes to us and says, hey, I need to fix this problem. My windows are broken. I want to fix them. I can get new ones for this. We say, oh, no, we want you to have these over here because, whatever. And it's, double the cost. So that I think is where your economic feasibility comes in. It's not how much money is necessarily in their pocket. It's the relative difference between achieving the same objective.
Right, because especially since the fiberglass versus the vinyl, we're really not achieving a wood window, right? So to me, the reason that I'm talking the finances, which I don't think is the only thing we have to rely on, I actually think we have the ability to do this based on the conversation that we had with City Council last week and the agreements that we came to. I think we are going forward. We will have the inventory. We will have a menu, if you will. We'll have something similar to the Grass Valley. But for right now, I think with this home that is not one of the, nationally registered homes, is keeping the same overall look. I don't see the value in us forcing them to do the fiberglass when we're not actually going to wood. And vinyl is a little bit more affordable. And again, I always go back to, if we can tell them that they have to do this, but if they don't do it and the house disintegrates, we've lost all power anyway. And so I try to land, I value the historic districts and I value what we're going for. I really do, especially after reading everything. Like, it really it reminds you how cool of an asset it is that we have. However, in this specific case, and in many of these cases, I think that we could be putting an undue burden for a payback that isn't there. And so that's where I kind of land in the financial, not so much, oh, you know, you should be able to, or you can or can't, but more so, what are we requiring and what is our outcome? So we're requiring 5,000 extra, but we're not going to wood. So, and I definitely think the wood is, you know, the 22 is wildly different. So that's why I landed back on the vinyl. If it was a difference of a little bit less, you know, then I could see it being more of an argument. But I still don't see where we have a super argument not to go for vinyl versus fiberglass when they're both not wood.
Except that the fiberglass does not represent, the fiberglass represents a reasonable alternative, both in durability and financial expense, and does not open the floodgates for vinyl windows throughout the historic district. And I think the staff recommendation for a balanced and reasonable accommodation vis-a-vis the fiberglass window is a good one. I think it really does strike a balance between all of the various elements we're trying to achieve. Appreciation for the financial impact for any applicant, retaining character in the historic district, avoidance of the just rampant replacement of wood with vinyl. Okay, I think all of these things on balance, I think by requiring the fiberglass as an intermediary and reasonable alternative preserves the integrity of at least the spirit of the historic district and utilization of the Secretary of Interior's guidelines. So that's kind of where there's no perfect answer in this, but this is where I feel comfortable with the decision. I would have regrets, I think. I would certainly regret compelling the applicant to use wood. I think I would equally regret being so permissive as to allow vinyl throughout. So, and it's unfortunate that all of his windows are visible from the streets, because you can see it if it's only street view. Well, we can be a little bit more strict, but we do try to strike balance, economic and otherwise. So I'm of the inclination to follow staff's recommendation to use to support the fiberglass.
Could you guys help me remember when we had a Windows case? I want to say it was last year, but it could have been a little bit longer. I'm not sure. Where they had aluminum windows. Did we go with? We went with vinyl on those ones, didn't we?
Right.
Yeah. So I think I fully understand what you're saying, and I do have a lot of compassion for that.
Can staff
I agree with you that it's not an easy answer, but I think until we have a menu of things saying in the historic district you should have fiberglass, I go back to that.
Not that you should, but the
that's
fiberglass
acceptable.
represents a reasonable,
Right.
a balance between, the ideal standard would be wood. I think we could all agree that the ideal standard, ideally, if money was no option or anything else, wood would be the appropriate choice. Okay, but we recognize the financial impact of that. But vinyl is, we just find vinyl to be unacceptable in the historic district.
Can staff provide some background on that?
Go ahead.
Bedford? It was Bedford, the corner of Bedford, right as you go to turn. I can't remember what the name of the road is. Pleasant Street. And so that it had aluminum windows, but it had been heavily modified. So nothing of the original structure would indicate it needed to follow the adherence of the Secretary of Interior standards, which is why when the applicant applied for vinyl, you guys were okay with it, and staff recommended approval.
Yeah, and I think that's a rare exception. I think there you go. There's exceptions to everything. I think there's a good exception for the utilization of vinyl in a historic district. But I think on balance, in general, we don't want to allow that unless there's, a compelling reason or justification or allowance for it. So I'm probably going to hold. I'm going to hold a vote in favor of the fiberglass and probably a nay on any other alternative. That's where I will vote.
Well, I'm more in favor of the fiberglass. I think it's a overall better quality product. Probably has better insulative value, R value than the vinyl. What I've read about them, makes them sound like a very good alternative. So that is my inclination, although I do appreciate, your position that it is another nearly $5,000 more based on the bids that were submitted for that fiberglass option. But I wonder, too, if it just would, not having seen them installed for sure, knowing that we're looking at it, if you can actually see the difference between fiberglass and vinyl. Although the beveled edge, it sounds like it is, probably a little bit nicer looking window once installed. So I think my inclination is to go with the fiberglass in this particular case. Are you willing to support that?
Yes, and yes, like I said, this is a really tough situation
It
where
is.
where I think if you guys are leaning towards the fiberglass, and I fully understand the reasoning why, I do.
And the house that you mentioned on Bedford and Pleasant, I just happened to go by that recently, and it looks really sharp. Mm-hmm. And I remember what it looked like when it had the old windows, and so it's, we're all in the same situation, kind of pulled in different directions, trying to make sure that we maintain these houses, make them livable, we don't lose more housing stock, and but then keep the integrity of our historic districts.
Yeah, that was the other thought that went through that I had sort of mentioned in my goal is if you can't see the fiberglass on the outside of it, does the pane look the same on the fiberglass window? I struggle with that.
I think it's paintable. I think the fiberglass is paintable. You won't see that, but it's paintable, right? As opposed to vinyl that's not paintable. Not sure.
Mm-hmm. So it goes in whatever color it comes out. Yeah, I understand.
Otherwise, that's a lot more work when it's sliding up and down and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you got to paint the sashes.
Yeah, a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, that's sort of where it's that, if you can't see it and we're having this additional cost, but they look the same, and it's not wood. I fully understand and I could understand if we go towards fiberglass, and that would not be offensive to me, but I just think that we need to think about that.
I'm also remembering now that our consultant mentioned that fiberglass is being used more in a lot of restoration projects, although, again, we haven't seen them. We don't know what scale he was talking about, but he did mention that as far as new materials that seem to be falling within the flexibility under the SOIS, fiberglass was being used, but that, which is something he mentioned during the...
The consultant really did emphasize that we have the ability to choose for our community what our priorities are.
Yes.
And to really adhere to the levels that we want to.
I guess I'd just add that the consultant didn't say in what context that comes in, because again, there's different classifications for properties within an historic district. and how you handle each one is different. So I wouldn't take that too far because it depends on the kind of situation that it's in. Again, it's,
and given that, unfortunately, we haven't developed a classification system. I think, that might be a good idea. How much, what's the level of contribution? And so, given that, I'm swinging back now toward the fact that this is and always has been a pretty modest house. I mean, compared to the Blair house down the street, big mansion. This was always just kind of a middle class, affordable house, and that then argues in going for the most affordable option, since that was the basis of us looking for flexibility in the standards was affordability. I would like to make a motion for consideration by the group.
Can I ask one more question to staff
Oh.
before you make your motion? Was your landing on fiberglass sort of the same the discussion that we're having? It's a middle of the road. The consultant talked about it.
I would say yes, staff was, and also based on precedent of earlier planning commission discussions and decisions you made on previous applications that are similar, where vinyl seems to be something that's been rejected numerous times in the past. And I know you were favorable to different materials that really give the appearance of wood, even though it may not be a wood replacement.
I would be willing to bet that if we were to approve vinyl windows, it would be appealed. Not by the applicant, but someone would appeal it. Someone would appeal vinyl.
And you think the fiberglass might be more?
I think the fiberglass is going to be, and I think even if someone were to appeal the fiberglass, I think fiberglass stands a much better chance of withstanding an appeal than if we were to approve vinyl. Now that's just a guess.
well,
I do think, and again, I think the fiberglass is a reasonable alternative that addresses economics. I think it addresses the fact that this is a non-contributing property. You raise the classification, and even though we don't have it, I think it's intuitive that we certainly have some properties which we would put a far greater standard of retention of character, design, and materials on than we would this. And I think all of those are defensible for us in a decision for fiberglass. I become more and more confident with that position the longer I sit here and listen to my fellow commissioners. So,
a couple observations. One, I don't know who wants to appeal, but I think there's any deviation from the Interior Secretary's standards, you're going to run that potential no matter whether it's vinyl or fiberglass or vinyl over wood. So that's always a potential. I appreciate all the concerns everyone has. They're very important. My concern is process. Ultimately, the burden of proof and the burden of persuasion rests with the applicant. So far, the precedent we would be establishing is if you come back enough times, you might wear this group out. And if you use nebulous phrases like cost, no one's going to press you very far. I haven't seen these windows to know what kind of condition there is. I didn't go up close to them. I've only seen them from the street. But my concern is again about consistency, and that's very important. We waited for months for a discussion that hopefully people could have had very quickly because the material that we had handed out was very short. And although there was reference to the Grass Valley standards, the link to it wasn't provided, and the expert wasn't familiar with it. Let me just tell you that one of the things that's in it is something I recommended the last time we were here, which is it has a list of all the window options that are available, different kinds of products that we only learn about on a case-by-case basis, as illustrated by today's discussion. And in addition, it's got a list of experts that are available in that community with expertise on historic preservation. So whether it's masonry or roofs or window carvings or whatever it is, they have experts. They're not leading you to one particular answer. They're not guiding you into one commercial enterprise. They have all the options out there. We don't know what they are. We're only learning about it on a case-by-case basis. And looking at it from a distance, as I have over a dozen years, we need some consistency.
Well,
So
Commissioner, but you're right. So you're absolutely correct that we have a deficiency in terms of the resources that are available to us or the specificity of the guidelines which we can apply. I think we agree to that. And I know we keep touting Grass Valley. That may or may not be what we want or the direction that we go. Okay.
Right, it's just an
But
example.
the point remains that we aren't there yet, and so therefore we have to operate within the confines of what we do have available to us. And at the same time, we can decry the deficiency that it presents to us, but it's still what we have to operate within. Because every application that comes to us until we get to the next level is going to have to be treated the same way. We're going to have to apply the same approach and deficiency, for lack of a better description, to those future applications. With regards to cost, I think the applicant has shown, the applicant wants to do vinyl. So in terms of wearing this commission down, I don't think that's that's correct, actually. He wants to do vinyl, and that is the cheapest alternative for him to do. I am not inclined to support that approach. I'm inclined to support something that's going to be more expensive, but it's going to be less expensive, certainly, than a wood replacement. So, and as far as the appeal, yes, anyone can be sued. Anything can be appealed, but I think in terms of defensibility of the decision, I think the fiberglass, I would bet on the fiberglass being more defensible than I would vinyl. So, is anyone in favor or willing to make a motion? Commissioner Keeney.
And before I start with that, let's not forget, this is not the only applicant that's come before us who said that they could not even get a bid to restore the existing. And we've had, discussions back and forth, but the fact that contractors didn't supply a reasonable bid, they thought that it was not a suitable option. I think you've swayed me that the middle option, the fiberglass, we actually have 4, which the unknown of keeping those windows and having them somehow made watertight and energy efficient, we don't even know how much that would cost. So I think you're right that the fiberglass is an affordable option. So with that, I'd like to launch into, and with your help and patience, craft a motion based on the language found on what's page 12 in the April 18th, 2023 staff report. I just would like to work off of that for some of the standard language. So the Plan Commission finds as follows: in accordance with this authority granted to it under Placerville zoning ordinance sections 10.3.1C, 10.4.9C, 10.4.10H. And before I get any further, I'm borrowing this language, but I think we should strike any reference to paint and lighting fixtures at this time, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll try to help me catch all of those references, if you would, everyone on the commission and staff. The application has been received from Paul Cogiola, the applicant and property owner, for consideration of site plan review 23-05. requesting approval to replace existing wood windows with Marvin Infinity windows as proposed in the June 29th, 2023 email in attachment 1 to the existing single-story, single-family residence located at 3176 Cedar Ravine Road, and all the rest of the language in 1-1. Staff report was, for the site plan, request was prepared and considered. Leave number 2 in there unchanged. Number 3, character defining features, let's leave that in there. And then move to number 4. The proposed window changes are not strictly replacements in kind of the existing house material. However, the request is consistent with city's historic criteria. I'm sorry. Let me go back to number 4. The proposed window changes are not strictly replacements in kind of the existing window material. However, there is flexibility in application of the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidance for rehabilitating historic buildings. Particularly, the character and aesthetics of the original windows is appropriately retained, particularly in regards to appearance, color, and texture, by the installation of the proposed fiberglass windows. Moving on to number 5, the proposed modification to the windows is consistent with Goal C, Policy C6, Goal 1, and add encouraging proper maintenance of homes and Policy 1 of the community design element of the general plan. And the fiberglass window is an affordable option for this project. The use of the replacement windows will not degrade the integrity of the existing historic district. And strike the last phrase on 5. Just end it at guideline 4C3B of the development guide, striking the words "as this work does not maintain and restore character." Strike that. And then changing number 6, the project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to section 15061B4 of the California Environmental Quality Act. And then I think that's all we need to do to modify the existing. And so that is my motion, Mr. Friend.
There's a motion. Do I have a second?
Chair, staff would like to revise the reference to the CEQA exemption.
That was be my question to you guys. 15301.
Can we get a
303?
second and then make those adjustments? Otherwise, it's immaterial. Do I have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. I'll start first with staff's comments, or Commissioner Carter, you were...
The CEQA determination would have to be switched to 15303, correct?
15301 and
301.
15331 to get in the historic aspect.
And that is,
So 15301 is for existing facilities,
Right.
no change to the existing use. And then 15331 is it's in, based on your finding, consistent with the SOI standard implementation.
okay, thank you for that correction.
So we have a motion and a second. Thank you for that motion. Question, I don't recall in that motion any finding of economic feasibility consideration. Did you?
I intended to say the fiberglass window is an affordable option for this project. Did I not say that?
You did.
Okay, then I missed it. All right, so we covered that. Any other findings that Commissioner feels we should make in that supports the decision? I mean, I'm happy with the motion, but this is the opportunity to add anything else, because we had some pretty good deliberation on this.
Chair,
Yes.
could I did actually prepare some draft at least conditions.
Ah,
Thank you for we actually would like to have a copy of whatever you were reading off of. That way we make sure that we get it. If you could email it, that would be great, or after the meeting. Anyway, I have prepared some conditions that we would like to have included if possible.
so these will have to be considered as friendly amendments to the motion. The chair sees no reason why staff is going to offer technical information that we can simply accept as friendly amendments, right? So,
Okay. I
however,
wasn't sure
you're
if-
not in a position to make a motion,
I am not.
so
That's why
we'll
I
need
have
someone
it
else.
written
We'll
so
need
I can-
someone else to move
So
a
do you-
friendly amendment to adopt. I'm just trying to think of the process here. But she's going to read these to us. Go ahead. Go ahead, Kristen. Let's hear what you have to say.
Okay. So condition number 1, approval of SPR 23-05 to replace the 12 wood windows visible from the right-of-way with fiberglass. I apologize, I don't have the specific in front of me. At the existing primary dwelling located at 3176 Cedar Ravine Road, APN 003-252-004. Approval is limited to compliance with the project description, the applicant's submittal package listed below, I through V, as well as other conditions of approval set forth herein. The documents you would be approving tonight, the Historic District Review application submitted March 3rd, 2023, the site plan, sheet S1, submitted March 3rd, 2023, elevations submitted on the same date, the proposed, the bid submitted on June 29th for the fiberglass window, submitted June 29th. Then condition number 2, site plan review expiration. The approval of the site plan shall expire and become null and void 18 months after the date of approval unless a building permit has been obtained. It's pretty standard. Runs with the land, terms and conditions of approval of the site plan review shall run with the land, shall be binding upon and be to the benefit of heirs, legal representatives, successors, and assignees of the property owner. 4, revisions. Any proposed changes to the project description or conditions of approval shall be submitted to the Development Services Department Planning Division for determination of appropriate procedures. Other applicable requirements. The project approval is subject to all applicable requirements of the federal, state, city of Placerville, and other affected governmental agencies. The applicant is, 6, the applicant is responsible for obtaining a building permit prior to construction. 7, except as otherwise specified or provided for in the project plans in these conditions. The project shall conform to the development standards and design requirements adopted by the City of Placerville, specifically including but not limited to the site plan review criteria, City Code Section 10-4-9G. And 8, all construction shall be limited to Monday through Friday between the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Saturdays between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., with no construction permitted on Sundays or city or state recognized holidays.
So to the maker of the motion, I would offer a friendly amendment that we incorporate by reference the conditions that were just offered to us by staff.
Okay.
And then they can be a part of the record. They'll be
Yes.
part of the minutes.
Okay.
That's be my friendly amendment.
Agreed.
And the seconder of the motion accept that? Okay, great. So then we have, I don't know if you heard the amendment.
Apologize, no.
So we just amended our motion to incorporate by reference the terms and conditions as you read, and then they will be incorporated into the minutes, right? So that the final approval with the motion is made by Commissioner Keeney and seconded by Commissioner Lepper. It'll all be one package. And so the maker of the motion and the second of the motion accepted the friendly amendment. So, any additional discussion on the motion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Carter,
Aye.
Chair Friend,
Aye.
Vice Chair Keeney,
Aye.
Commissioner Lepper,
No.
Commissioner Smith.
No.
Motion carries 3-2. And of course, it is appealable within 10 days to City Council. So I appreciate you bearing with us. Probably didn't get the result you wanted in its entirety, but you can move forward. Thank you, sir. Okay. Let's move on then to, sure, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Let's go ahead and reconvene. I'm not sure the time is relevant. Item 12, new business. We have no new business. That brings us to matters from commissioners and staff. We'll begin with staff reports, please.
Our next planning commission meeting will be October 3rd.
Okay, 10/3, no meeting at the end of December. Okay, any other notices or information? Fantastic. 13.2, Planning Commission matters. Any matters that commissioners have for other commissioners or staff or for the public?
If the chair would indulge me for a moment.
Sure.
Next Monday is the 22nd anniversary of 9/11. I just wanted to recognize, as a 22-year veteran of law enforcement and a first responder, I wanted to thank or recognize the 71 law enforcement officers, 343 firefighters, and 2,563 civilians that lost their life that day. And just wanted to recognize that anniversary coming up here next Monday and give it the proper reverence that it deserves. So thank you, Chair, for allowing me to.
Thank you for bringing that back. I always worry that our memories fade, and they fade more rapidly in today's fast-paced world than perhaps they did in years past. So I think that's a very appropriate reminder. Thank you for that. Any other items from commissioners? Then 13.2.1, Special Committees Report, report by the Historic Review Special Committee. And before I hear from the committee, I think based upon the events of the last couple of weeks, and not least of which was our joint meeting with council, and also other events that have occurred, I think it's important at this point, for me as chair, I want to refocus, refine the special committee's activities. First, I'll say I think it's obvious that council is supportive of revisiting the historic inventory. And so it's no longer necessary for us to develop a resolution to recommend that to council. Certainly not that as a specific item. What I think I would like to see this committee do, and Commissioner Smith, you actually went through a litany of items, I think, that need to be done. But I think what this committee needs to do is to develop a list of priorities. The historic inventory certainly is one of those priorities, but I think a number of other items have come up even as recent as this evening's discussion. And so I think I want to see a list of priorities of things that we need to do to fulfill our obligations that were given to us by resolution. And not only strictly to meet that, but also what will be of value to the city in terms of our historic districts. Okay? What do we need to do to preserve and maintain, and even to possibly expand our historic districts? I want to reiterate two things that I have made very clear, at least I've tried to make very clear since this committee was put together. And that is, one, I as chair am very appreciative of the efforts that Commissioners Carter and Commissioner Smith have put into it. And the fact that you are officers in the Heritage Society speaks to your personal interest in the value that you place on it. At the same time, I've also made it very, very clear that when you are representing this body, the commission, in your official capacity as a commissioner and as a member of this special committee, that I, as the chair, want to be apprised fully of the groups that you are meeting with, and actions that you think are appropriate to take. And I have to acknowledge, after Commissioner Keeney expressed her concerns at our last meeting, it gave me great pause, and I had to go back and review some of our prior commission meetings on this topic. And it's absolutely true that a proposal was to come before this body for review, discussion, and possible approval before it went anywhere else, and that didn't happen. And in fact, I think the phrase was, a proposal was going to come down to us to explain where every nickel was going to go. That clearly didn't happen, and I do not want to see that happen again. So I hope that you have clear direction on what I think your purview should be. I hope you will continue to serve in that. And I don't know if you have any additional reports for us this evening since our last meeting, and if you do, then I'll defer. Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Yes, just to follow up on what you suggested, what you may not know is I got a directive from the Deputy City Manager, Dave Warren, to present a proposal with at the same time as the Arts Council. And so I did. Now, it was my error and mine alone for assuming that was the last shot at it, but that was the request to do it at that time. And it clearly wasn't the right time. So it's my mistake only. Every time we've given a report, we've asked, do you have any questions? Nothing was made on behalf of this body. And to make something else very clear, the interest is not in conflict, it's compatible. It is exactly what this body was mandated to do 8 years ago. This body is able to make recommendations. We cannot be faulted, I can't, for doing what this body was given a duty to do. If the council, the commission, chooses not to exercise those duties, that's fine. You can recommend that the city take the resolution away. I did ask the first time it came up for being able to contact you and acknowledge it. I didn't have your email address. I didn't have your phone number. I got it later. So I've already acknowledged those errors. It was a mistake on my part. But, and believe me, I welcome criticism. I'm in an environment for 50 years that it was commonplace. I don't usually get the receiving end of it, but I've seen it all the time. What I am concerned about is making it personal. Talking about yelling at a TV set was a little over the top. And raising issues about ethics, it is not unethical. If you come before this body and you're going to take a vote, then you recuse yourself. I saw you do it, Mr. Chairman, some years ago when you stepped aside, got on that side of the dais, which is perfectly appropriate, and that's what you do when it comes to asking for money. There have been a number of people who are, for example, on the Arts Council and made pitches for supporting them. That's not a conflict. I've watched decisions of both city attorneys, the past and the present, on a number of occasions, and it does not fall within that bailiwick. It doesn't. If you're going to raise those issues, you can certainly do it, but it doesn't have to be under this amorphous guise of the appearance of impropriety, because it's not. We've had council members who've had family members of one nonprofit group or another come before the body and ask for money. That's happened. And I've heard the city attorney address that issue within the last 6 months. So no matter what you think of, Commissioner Carter and I knew as the new kids on the block that there'd be some need to walk cautiously. And I've already acknowledged not having done with the kind of propriety that's possible. But it's not necessary to make it emotional, and it's not necessary to suggest that it's improper, because there's proper ways to go for it. I was on that side for 12 years, patiently raising issues about conflict of interest, about ex-party communication. I felt like I was talking to a brick wall. I swear, no offense, but it was like, and I thought I was being helpful because it's really simple concepts between quasi-judicial and quasi-legislative, and I'm still not sure that's very clear. It's very simple. So again, I don't mind somebody raising it, but it doesn't have to be with the same kind of emotions. What we need to go forward is to do exactly what Resolution 7896 provides. We are the body that provides advice to the City Council. And the last time we were here, I may be mistaken, but I heard several people suggest that we ought to, when we have that joint session, hear from the public. Staff suggested it wasn't the right time, but it is the time to hear from the public and get their advice. And I'm not stuck on Grass Valley. It just happens to be that Grass Valley was an example offered. We need to look at all those options and ask these questions about, are these people out there who are in the districts, are they really in the dark? Do they understand why? Are we doing enough to make sure they understand why the ordinance was passed?
So let me just jump right on that.
Sure, please.
And what I think that becomes becomes one of your priorities or one of your roadmaps, if you will, or things that need to happen, and that is community engagement. Okay, so what does that look like? So in the work that the committee is to be doing, the work product that I would like to see from this committee then details that. Okay, so community engagement, and a subcategory of that might be folks in the historic district. Subcategory of that is buy-in. We heard buy-in a lot from the discussion with council, right? And I think that's a legitimate issue that we face, right? Because we have to align the incentives. The city clearly has incentives for the preservation of historic districts in terms of value, et cetera, et cetera. I think Councilmember Clarici, made it clear that, I'm not sure property owners necessarily see that. Okay, well, does that then become an education or an outreach, right? So we have engagement and we have outreach. So these are the kinds of things that I want to see come from this subcommittee. Okay, that if we take these steps, and here's how we would prioritize them, and here's the roadmap or the work plan, how this would happen, then that's something we can then give to council. We can advise council. Here are our deficiencies, and here's what needs to happen. And then also you can probably come up with resources that you believe this body needs in order to execute our responsibilities as the Historical Advisory Committee, right? Because right now, we don't have much in the way of tools, at least where I sit. I don't have a lot of tools, okay? I think to say that the SOI standards and guidelines is nuanced is a gross understatement. I mean, the more I sit there, the more I read it, the more is like, I need formal training and instruction with this to be proficient in utilization. And then how does our community, Placerville, how do we want to adopt and use it? And I think, let's look at Grass Valley, and maybe there's some others that we can look at. That's the work that this committee, in my view, needs to do, and it can be, it's more focused.
I have a question.
And tangible. Commissioner Keeney, and then I'll go back to Commissioner Smith.
I want to make sure that I'm clear on the charge for the committee, and because you used, they are reporting to you.
Here,
keeping
they're
you
reporting
apprised.
to commission, not,
But
but in
to
my
all of
direction.
us.
To all of it.
Okay, that's the way I understand.
They're
Because
reporting here. But I guess what I'm saying is,
But
if they're going to go and meet with let's say they're going to go meet with the Association of Realtors, or they're going to go and meet with some other. I actually, as the chair, I'd like to. Hey, we're going to go and meet because I may want to go there.
Okay, that
I may wanna
raises
be
a
as a
second
chair.
question.
Yes.
In terms of transparency, So you're keeping apprised, they're keeping you apprised of those meetings. Should those be somehow entered into the record, maybe an attachment to the
Oh,
meeting
that they attended and they should report out that they attended.
So that it becomes part of the public record.
Without question, 100%.
And
But
then back to thanks for that clarification,
Yeah.
because I don't want to belabor that. I think I understand. I just want to make sure I
Yes.
hadn't gotten off on the wrong track. But we have a long list of needs, and I think as far as the commission and what we need, I don't want to overburden the committee. I think coming back with broad recommendations and then full discussion
Sure.
of this body, and then refining that, because you've listed a lot of things and there's a lot of resources, but I don't think it's fair to ask two people to review all of that before they report back to us.
I'm sorry.
But I think
No.
a
That's
not
stepwise,
what I was
a stepwise
suggesting, yeah.
approach of very broad, like you said, what do we need, broadly speaking?
Right.
And a set of priorities. Within that, then, let's talk about how we can address deficiencies, talk about it as a group, and share this burden, and also educate all of us as this process moves forward, as opposed to having some report of who you've met, but then waiting until months out, then suddenly you've got a huge work product that I'd rather address it as you go along. Start with the broad brushstrokes, and then let's refine it as a group. Do you agree that?
Yeah, and attach a 1, 3, 5-year plan that can carry over from commission to commission, because none of us are here in perpetuity, right? There's going to be other commissioners, and we want other individuals, and for staff. Staff should kind of have this roadmap, or this timetable of things that we think should be addressed, and maybe how and when, so there's continuity of this. Okay? No commissioner here will necessarily be reappointed. Right, so I wouldn't.
I think that is really imperative. We
Yeah,
found
so
ourselves
I don't want
frustrated
this
and,
work, because
yes.
again, I truly value the work that Commissioner Carter and Commissioner Smith are doing, and I really appreciate them taking this on. Okay, and so this is a good reset, regroup, or refocus, and I'm not sure that we necessarily had a clear vision for the work plan when this idea came up. I immediately saw the value, and I immediately saw the need, and I had kind of a vague concept of what might happen. Now I think it's been refined a little bit more.
And another thing that occurred to me, depending on how we get input back from City Council about the inventory itself, I think we all recognize that that's a high priority and very important. But as far as the coming back with possible outline of what the RFP might look like for us to discuss as a body, again, I think, Kirk, you mentioned part of our responsibility is to advise City Council. So if they are willing to hear from us, then I think some research that maybe you've already done or that you will be doing shortly, then the group can consider that and write some sort of report that we all then vote on, that we're all in agreement. That goes officially up to them, and they have then this record of how what the priorities are.
I envision us submitting a report to council and recommendations to council on the things that need to be done to assist the commission in meeting its responsibilities as the historic advisory body that have given back
And also
to us.
Discharging our duties as planning commissioners. I think the
Correct.
inventory.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's really what I see as the ultimate result of this work.
What I-
Then council has that and says, okay, the council can prioritize. Well, we're going to need money for this, or we're going to do, and then that's going to be up to council how they approach that.
And if, again, then they look at the first iteration that we discuss and advise them on. If they want more from us, then that gives you clarity on, how the special committee should focus their work, because it's, it's a mountain. There's a mountain of information out there.
And I wanted to suggest, for just that reason, do not think of it as the two of us. It's all of us. For example, I'm just going to give 2 illustrations. I've heard you a number of times talk about color palette. I think it's very important and often gets short shrift. That's one of the things that needs to be examined, so that we have some standard for how to apply color palette standards when we have these applications. In addition, I've heard you talk about the Mills Act, and I believe Commissioner Carter has discussed it as well. I would like to hear more about it. It doesn't make sense for me to go study it when the two of you, certainly you, have already studied it. It's something we need to look at. Likewise.
But, until we get direction from city council that they want to learn, or they want our advice on that,
Well,
it's just self-education.
That's what the resolution says. We have the authority to make recommendations to them. It doesn't mean
But
they
if
have
we
to.
make lots of recommendations all at once, again, that's why I think Commissioner Friend said, let's set our priorities, and so that we
It's just an
move this
illustration.
forward.
Likewise,
while the
Commissioner
iron
Lepper
is
has great expertise in proofing and writing and making things interesting. And when I look at the website for what people in those historic districts have to look at, it needs a lot of work. So that's an example. When we have 2 persons, it's in part because the Brown Act, if you have more than 2, then you have to give notice, and there's all kinds of additional requirements. So it's not to circumvent that. I've heard the council does it all the time. They have a 2 by 2 committee, which is 1 person for the city council and 1 from the board of supervisors, and that's why they do it. I've heard them say that. But you can, there needs to be more communication. This kind of discussion needs to be put on an agenda for people to do exactly what we're doing now. When we look at these issues in the context of a contested case, that's a lousy opportunity to start discussing vinyl versus plastic versus whatever. We need to look at it in a systematic fashion. And this kind of discussion, in my view, is just the start. Everything Chairman Friend has said is appropriate. It needs to be done, but it's not going to be done tonight. It needs to have an agenda item where we go over just this kind of planning, where we can openly talk about what we have in mind. But we suggested several months ago about having public hearings, and the last time I was here, so up to you.
Having an agenda item with public discussion, to me, is putting the cart before the horse. We need to have specific items that we're going to talk about that could be agendized. And I think the first place we'd go would be our first set of priorities for the historic district. So now there's a tangible item there. It can be agendized, there can be reference materials, and then people can attend.
I agree.
But
And
so-
break this off into workable pieces, because it is so broad.
And what I encourage the committee to do is just to throw everything they can at the board, right? And a couple more things have just got, the websites come up, the Mills Act has come up. All these things keep coming up. So we need to throw all those on the board, right? And then we can list them out and kind of take a look at them, say, okay, well, let's make some priorities. And then we could probably even have some conversation about how much effort it's going to take, or what resources might be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think we can begin to build something, but that's really kind of where we need to start.
And it would be really helpful, maybe we should ask staff how much time we can commit to this, but if we had some listing even of what you found, it's included in our agenda packet, so that we can, the 3 of us who aren't on the special committee, can take a look at that, and then public too, to comment on that, so that we come in prepared to talk about setting those priorities. Is that?
Yeah, and then it just occurred to me, the 2 of you, being members, engaged members, important members of the Heritage, is a Heritage Association, or Heritage Society? I always get those mixed. Heritage Association. So from where you sit there, you probably have all kinds of ideas about what's needed, right? I mean, those can be put in a list as well, because in that way, you're subject matter experts to this body, okay? I think we're gonna listen to what you have to say on that, okay? And then the only time yeah, so I'll leave it.
Well, here's one thing I'll tell you that I had in mind. It doesn't matter who does it. But I was thinking of a survey done in all the historic districts. You get a group of people who, first of all, come up with a list of questions, objectively structured. And you go door to door and start asking people, do you know whether the city of Placerville has historic districts? Did you know that your property is in it? Do you know whether you are required to get a permit when you put in windows or have a water heater replaced? Simple questions like that, because we have, over the years, heard people say, I didn't know we were in an historic district. I didn't know that we were supposed to do that. We hear it all the time. That'd be one set of questions to find out. It has to be structured in an objective way and not leading questions that are designed to elicit certain answers because we want accurate information. So that's one thing that could be done to get information, because we don't know what the public knows. Secondly, you've read and gone over some of those studies, and you've watched at least one of the workshops on the importance of having an historic district and having it backed up by some kind of enforcement mechanism, how it counterintuitively actually adds to the value of property and adds to increased revenue for sales tax. Do the people out in the street know that? If this fellow knew that, would that change his attitude? I don't know. But that's something that the public needs some education on that. That's one thing to examine. So those are a couple of illustrations.
All right. Any other discussion? Commissioner Leopard, do you have anything to add to this?
No, not particularly. I'm just kind of like doing off the top of my head some topics,
Good.
and I'll share that with Commissioners Carter and Smith. And I did work a little bit more on the website and on the letters, and I kind of flushed one letter out to be to current homeowners and one to potential homeowners for the Realtors Association. Anyway, they're still drafts, obviously. And they need to be, who should I send them to?
All of us.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what to do with it, basically. You send it to you? Okay, cool. Yeah. I fleshed out a little bit more based after Thursday, but it's still just obviously a draft, but I think it's something that could be, I think, pretty easily uploaded if everyone agrees it's not anything controversial changes. That could be one little thing off the list that's easy to call done for now, and then and I'll send you the other ideas that I have.
And we're going to have the minutes from the joint meeting. I think from those minutes, we're going to be able to glean some things. And I think from that, if you, I'm going to ask the two of you now to rethink about your efforts as a special committee with this direction. My guess is that you're going to start to come up with a lot of things that need to be done and could be done, and ideas, and then prioritize them. And that's really going to be valuable to us. Okay. All right. Well, then that brings us to item 14, adjournment, and then we stand adjourned at approximately 8:25?
8:23.
8:23, 22, and counting. Thank you all for your input.